Touchdown, Florida State. Hey, Seminole fans, it's time for another edition of the Osceola Podcast.
Hi, this is Jerry Kutz, publisher and owner of the Osceola, and I'm honored to be joined by legendary Florida State football coach Bobby Bowden and John Corry, who is the executive producer of the Bowden Dynasty feature film. Welcome, Coach.
It's good to talk to you, and I'm glad you're doing this.
Hey, John, it's good to have you on the call with us.
Yes, thanks for the invite, Jerry.
You know, as you all know, I've relaunched the Osceola, and we want you, Coach Bowden, to be the very first podcast we produced.
Oh, that's good. I remember we used to look so forward to the Osceola, and I'm so glad you're cranking it back up again.
I was always amazed by that, Coach. I remember Sue Hall would call the office on Monday if the paper wasn't on your desk.
Oh yeah, we were called on that, but we were looking for that one.
I always wondered why.
Because you had interesting stories. You had interesting stories that involved our football team, and I would kind of get tipped off of what was good and what was bad. I got a lot out of that. It's
amazing to me to this day, but I really appreciate that. We're also joined by John. John's an FSU graduate and a Hollywood filmmaker, and he was just determined to produce this film honoring you, Coach.
Boy, I was so happy. I mean, it's funny. You know, it's funny how things are put together. You know, I did not know John, but I guess he was in school back when I first started coaching here. And so when he approached me on the idea, I thought it was a great idea. You know, and I really didn't know anything about John at that time. But the more I have I've seen some of his work other than mine during the past few years, and I believe he's about as good as anybody is putting a film like this together.
John, do you remember that day we ate lunch at the University Center Club? And
I sure do. I sure do. I was pitching you, Jerry, on this idea. I just felt like this was a story worth telling, and I was bound and determined to do it, but I had an idea of how I wanted to do it. And I remember you looked up at me, and I didn't know what you were doing. You're on your phone, and you said, John, what are you doing this afternoon? And I said, I'm clear. And you said, well, Coach is wide open. Let's get over there. And next thing you know, we were on Coach Bowden's doorstep, and I wasn't ready for that at all. And for me, and by the way, I've lived out in California since 1985, and I got the Osceola every week. We had to wait for it by mail back then. That's how you got your news. Yeah. But that was a lifeline for me, being so far out. This was before the internet, you know, and you had to wait almost for the summer and those preseason magazines to be able to read anything about the Seminoles except for the Osceola, which I always paid the extra for the first class. I think there was something extra where you got it faster or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Coach, you know, John told me he and his friends used to call it the excuse Eola.
The excuse Eola, because there was always one reason why we didn't, if something would happen, wide right.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
John, there's a clear distinction between an excuse and a reason.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, no excuses.
Well, you know, those days were great because we'd sit down with Coach Bowden and we'd do a one-on-one interview. And, Coach, at first I was flattered, and then I realized you weren't talking to me. You were talking to my readers, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You tell them what I wanted them to hear me say.
Well, Coach, when we did come over there that day, and I brought you a Hollywood film producer who said he wanted to do a movie about your life, I remember your first reaction. You said to me, "He wants to do a movie about me?"
You know, I've had 2 or 3 or 4 people come by in the last 10 years and talk about doing a movie. Then they leave. That's the last I hear of them. John is the only one that followed through, man. You know, so the more he got into it, the more excited I got because I liked the way he was approaching it, and there were certain points I wanted to be sure we got into the film that didn't seem to surprise him, and he stayed with it. You know, I mean, I had some points in there that probably not politically correct. and but they were correct publicly, and John used them and stayed with them, and some of the points that I brought out that was very important to me. I mean, I wouldn't want to do it without it. I thought maybe I couldn't see some of these programs wanting to do it because I got very personal with my beliefs, and but John put it together where it would go, and I think it did go.
John, the focus there was faith, family, and football, and I suspect that you did a great job of getting that in there. And I wanted to ask you, John, did you find yourself realizing the faith and football aspects of this story were even more compelling than the dynasty itself? 14 years of top 4 finishes with 2 national championships may never be surpassed. But was the faith in football even more compelling?
Yeah, it was, and that's when you know you have a movie. There's all kinds of sports films and about sports records and that kind of thing. But I read Coach's book called The Coach, and I think he put that out. Was that in 2010, Coach?
Yeah, about that time.
That book in 2010, 2011. I read chapter 2 when he talked about what happened to him as a kid and his illness, and it was a page turner. And I thought, oh my gosh, people don't know this.
We hope you've enjoyed the first segment of this podcast. To hear the entire episode, as well as past and future podcasts and daily coverage of Seminole sports, please subscribe to the Osceola at theosceola.com. Sign up today and enjoy a free 1-week trial subscription. Try us. You can rely on us.